One Small Step for Humanity. Beyond the Familiar. By Elton Gar. Riston stepped out of the airlock onto the cruise ship. Standing just inside the starship was an alien. It was one of the first aliens that Riston had ever seen in person. There were only a few thousand on Earth, and most were ambassadors, spending their time talking to world leaders or giving interviews. This one didn't look like any of those. It was about 5 feet tall, wearing a light blue uniform. Its head was closer to that of a hedgehog than anything else, and when it smiled, it showed 2 front teeth that might have looked like fangs if it hadn't seemed so friendly. It said,
"It's a true pleasure to have our first human guest. Please make sure to wear your translator at all times in case of emergency."
Riston reached up, absent-mindedly touching the device that had been sent to him, along with his ticket. He then said,
"First."
"Yes. We were quite surprised when you booked your ticket. We expected that the warnings would scare away everyone. But humans are, as we have come to understand them, quite adventurous."
The quills on the back of its head rose. There were, of course, plenty of humans who sought out adventure, but Riston wasn't one of them. Booking a cruise on a human ship that used the new technology to visit a few alien ports had been one of the most adventurous things he had ever done, and he had assumed he would be mostly eating at the buffet, watching shows, and looking out the windows into space. He opened his mouth to tell the alien that it had been a mistake, but as he did, he realized he had just, inadvertently, become an ambassador for humanity. If the first thing that the alien saw was a human being a coward and running away, then it might be hard to convince them of anything else. So he said,
"It should be quite an adventure."
"For all of us,"
the hedgehog steward said, and then turning added,
"Let me show you to your room."
Walking through the ship was an odd mix of familiar and alien. It was in every way a cruise ship with aspects that made Riston feel both intrigued and slightly uneasy. The layout of the ship was much like any cruise liner he'd seen in advertisements. Wide corridors lined with ornate railings, grand staircases spiraling upwards, and doorways leading to various amenities. The floors, however, were covered in a soft, shimmering material that seemed to absorb sound, lending the place a hushed, almost reverent atmosphere. The lighting was a gentle green hue, casting an otherworldly glow on everything. As they passed through what seemed to be the main atrium, Riston's eyes were drawn to a series of sculptures that twisted and spiraled, reflecting the green light in shifting patterns. The aliens he passed were as varied as the ship's decor. Some were tall and slender, with skin that shimmered like fish scales, while others were squat with large, expressive eyes. One group was gathered around a floating, transparent sphere, engaged in animated conversation, with gestures and subtle body movements entirely unfamiliar to Riston. He felt a strange mix of curiosity and isolation, aware that he was the only human on board and surrounded by beings whose languages and customs were entirely alien. The walls were adorned with murals that shifted and changed as he walked, depicting scenes of alien landscapes and beings that were both mesmerizing and slightly unsettling. There was an unmistakable scent in the air, a mix of unfamiliar spices and something sweet, hinting at a cuisine he had never encountered. The steward opened the door to his room, and Riston immediately relaxed. Inside, the room was more familiar: a bed, a window looking out into the vastness of space, and basic amenities.
We adjusted the room to normal human standards. There is a human toilet, water, and standard human rations if you need them. But the shots you took should make the food and drink safe to consume.
Riston stood there a moment, unable to bring himself to explain that he hadn't gotten the shots. He had always been afraid of needles, and had assumed they were just standard inoculations. Then, just as he said,
"I'm sorry,
he felt the ship shudder. The hedgehog said,
"I am sorry, but we have just taken off, and there is a great deal of work to do. Feel free to explore the ship. Just don't go outside."
Its chuckle was less human than the rest of its voice, but it was clear that it was at least meant to be a joke. Then it said,
"If you need anything at all, then pick up the phone or push any of the yellow buttons. I will get here as fast as I can."
And almost as fast as that, Riston was entirely alone on the ship. He checked the room carefully. It was in almost every way identical to the rooms he expected to see on a cruise ship. The bathroom was bigger, and the several boxes of U.S. Army surplus MREs were out of place. But the bed was comfortable, and there was even a balcony. Stepping out onto it, Riston felt like he was in space, and he reached out to grab the wall. He then slowly reached out. The glass was so clear he was surprised when he touched it, and when he pulled his hand away, there was a crackle of energy, and even the fingerprints he had left disappeared, leaving no sign of anything. That was too much for Riston, who went back inside and shut the door. Already emotionally exhausted, he sat down in the chair and took out a bottle of water. Sitting there drinking the water, it felt almost normal for a moment, and Riston allowed himself to relax. Riston spent the next couple of days adjusting to life aboard the alien cruise ship. His mornings began with quiet strolls along the promenade, where the vastness of space spread out before him like a living canvas. The ship's gentle hum provided a constant, calming background, though it also reminded him just how far from Earth he was. Meals were an adventure in themselves. The dining halls offered a dazzling array of alien dishes, each more curious than the last. At first, he stuck to the packaged human rations provided in his room, wary of the unfamiliar cuisine. However, curiosity soon won out, and he ventured to try some of the alien offerings. The food was unlike anything he'd ever tasted. Some dishes were intensely spicy, others sweet and sour, and many had flavors he couldn't quite place. The drinks, too, were a kaleidoscope of colors and textures, some lightly fizzy, others smooth and thick. Although he lacked the recommended shots, he carefully selected dishes that seemed relatively safe and found himself pleasantly surprised by the unique tastes. The ship's entertainment was a captivating blend of the familiar and the utterly alien. One evening he attended a performance in the Grand Theater, where beings with shimmering scale-like skin performed a dance that defied gravity. The music was haunting, a mix of tones and rhythms that resonated deeply, making the experience all the more immersive. During the day, Riston explored the ship's many amenities. He spent time in a lounge filled with art displays that shifted and changed, seemingly alive with the ship's subtle vibrations. In the library, he discovered a diverse collection of media, filled with stories and ideas from various alien cultures. The zero-gravity chamber was another highlight, offering an exhilarating experience as he floated freely, experiencing a sensation of weightlessness for the first time. It was both thrilling and disorienting, leaving him with a newfound respect for the alien passengers who navigated the chamber with ease. Despite being the only human on board, Riston found the alien crew and passengers generally friendly. They often acknowledged him with nods or gestures that he was gradually learning to interpret. The ship's environment, while still strange and alien, began to feel less intimidating and more like a place of discovery and unexpected comfort. Riston lounged in the observation deck, enjoying a moment of serenity, when the ship suddenly jolted, the hum of the engines cutting off. An alarm blared, followed by a voice over the intercom.
Attention passengers. We are experiencing an unexpected delay. Please remain in your rooms or designated areas.
Curious and concerned, Riston decided to investigate. As he moved towards the elevators, he spotted a group of figures, clearly not crew, moving stealthily down a corridor. They carried strange, intimidating devices, and their tense demeanor made Riston's heart race. He overheard snatches of conversation.
Takeover, loot,
And
hostages.
his unease turned to alarm when he saw them approach the steward who had greeted him upon arrival. The steward, with his hedgehog-like appearance and friendly demeanor, was now backed into a corner. One of the pirates, a stocky alien with a tough hide, held a device emitting a menacing hum. The steward raised his hands trying to placate them, but the pirates stepped closer, their postures aggressive. Riston's breath caught in his throat. He couldn't just let the steward die. So he grabbed a mop from a nearby service cart. With his heart pounding, he charged forward, swinging the mop with all his strength. It struck the pirate. Water went everywhere as the alien stumbled backward, the device clattering to the floor. The pirates turned, eyes widening in surprise. One of them cursed, taking a step back. Riston, driven by a mix of fear and desperation, shouted,
Get away from him.
His voice shook, but he continued swinging the mop. The pirates hesitated, their movements stalling as they glanced at each other, clearly unsure of what to do next. The leader, a tall alien with glistening scales, barked an order, but his crew didn't immediately respond. They shuffled awkwardly, casting wary glances at Riston, who kept advancing, his own fear manifesting in a flurry of wild swings. Spotting a fire extinguisher on the wall, Riston grabbed it and sprayed a thick cloud of foam at the pirates. The sudden spray made them flinch and cough, stumbling as they tried to clear their vision. One pirate, braver than the others, lunged at Riston, but he swung the extinguisher, hitting the pirate in the head with the bottom of the extinguisher. The pirate crumpled to the floor. The leader scowled, taking a cautious step back. The rest of the pirates, now retreating with hands slightly raised, moved slowly, clearly shaken. They were leaving, their earlier bravado replaced by a palpable uncertainty. As the pirates disappeared around a corner, Riston finally lowered the extinguisher, his arms trembling. The steward, still visibly shaken, approached him cautiously. He looked at Riston, a mix of relief and disbelief in his eyes.
That was something,
the steward managed, his voice shaky but filled with gratitude. He glanced back in the direction the pirates had fled, then looked at Riston with a mixture of awe and concern.
Are you all right?
Riston, still catching his breath, nodded slowly, the reality of what had just happened beginning to settle in.
Yeah, I think so,
he replied, his voice weak but steady. He felt the adrenaline draining away, leaving him exhausted but relieved. The hedgehog steward stood up, most of his fear disappearing, and said,
Excellent. There were some people who thought that this test was going to be too much for you.
Test?
Riston asked.
Certainly. We didn't know much about humans, but we saw how dangerous you could be. So, we needed a first-hand example of how humans reacted in a dangerous situation.
And I did what you wanted?
We didn't have any expectations. The pirates were the people who were fairly certain you wouldn't actually kill everyone.
There were people who thought I might kill everyone.
Most of us don't really understand violence. Some, like my race, never evolved the type of aggression found in other races. Many other species have evolved beyond the need for individual violence, or even chose to remove it once they understood that it wasn't useful for an advanced species.
But I did attack them.
The steward nodded, his quills rustling gently with the movement.
Yes, you did. And it was enlightening. Your response was neither excessively violent nor passive. It was a controlled reaction under duress. It shows a capacity for bravery, restraint, and most importantly, a sense of justice. That was good because there was some initial concern when you lied about the shots. It raised questions among us about how humans assess and approach risks, especially in unfamiliar environments. Some worried it might indicate a disregard for safety, both your own and others.
Riston felt his cheeks flush with a mix of embarrassment and defensiveness.
I'm just afraid of needles, and I didn't think it was important because I was going on a human ship.
The steward's expression softened, understanding evident in his eyes.
Even on a human ship, you could spread a sickness that might jump species. It's unlikely, but when it happens, it's bad.
Riston nodded, absorbing the information. He had unknowingly been part of a broader evaluation, not just of his actions, but of human nature itself.
So, I guess I passed your observation.
The steward chuckled, a sound like rustling leaves.
There is no pass or fail. But I believe that your actions are a good sign for future interactions.
What now?
Riston asked. The steward gestured towards the door.
I suggest you rest and enjoy the rest of your journey. The food is and always was safe. But if you need anything, don't hesitate to contact me.
Riston smiled, but he couldn't imagine what he'd need besides a good book. One without too much action in it.
My main goal for this story was to tell a simple and fun story. I like stories that enlighten or speak to important messages, but I don't think that every story needs or should be that. Sometimes people just need something to take their minds away from the world for a few minutes. I know I do. That also means I don't have a lot to say. This was the last story for July's theme of vacations and travel. We'll be moving on to a new theme on Friday. The poll for that theme will end soon, but if you want to vote, there is still time to sign up to be a new free member of my Patreon and vote at patreon.com/Elton. Or if you just want to keep up with my thoughts and get free stories every week, you can sign up for my newsletter at andscifi.com. You'll also get a free book. Thank you, Elton Gar.